Hello. Thank you. Welcome to my talk. I'm going to just go a little bit over some of the stuff that's going on at Unity and specifically talk a little bit about some of the different ways that our developers are using Unity and how they're making some monies and all of that kind of stuff. So, who the hell are you on the stage? I'm Joe Robbins, and my current job title is Community Evangelist at Unity, which is a bizarre title, and I'm still not comfortable with it. But yeah, that's me. And this is me with a submachine gun in Las Vegas, proving that playing video games, violent video games with guns, does not make you good at shooting. I did kill a hostage. It was a bullet in the eye as well. It was terrible. So yeah, there's no correlation we can prove. And also that looks like Daniel Kaplan from Mojang on the target. I noticed that last night. So yeah, this is my background. I started out as a 3D artist way back. And then kind of looked around trying to find some kind of job doing 3D modeling or animation for a while. And ended up landing this job as a Unity developer around 4-5 years ago now. So it was kind of early on when Unity was only on a Mac, and I don't think the iPhone version had been released yet, so it was kind of early days. So I kind of, because of the fact I was the only Unity person on the team, I had to pretty much learn all of the programming side as well. So I'm not going to claim that I'm a good programmer, but I can program to some extent. So then, after working with Unity for a little while, I then jumped over to Copenhagen, which would have been around 3 years ago, to become a Unity employee. I had various jobs within the company. It's been a pretty wild ride. When I first joined, there was like 25 people, and now there's like 180, probably more, probably about 15 people just got hired then, another 15 now. It's growing crazy at the moment, which is pretty interesting. So I did some work on demo team and work on some tutorials and feature demos and that kind of stuff. But now I currently find myself with the bizarre title of Community Evangelist, which pretty much means I go around and talk to people about Unity. So briefly about the company itself. These are the founders, Joachim, Nick, and David. And they set out on a quest to make a game, which they completed. And you'll all be completely familiar with Goo Ball. Who played Goo Ball? Hey, somebody put their hand up just then. Awesome. That's the first time that's ever happened. So yeah, the thing with Goo Ball was that they spent more time working on the tools than they did the game, and found that they'd put much more effort into making the tools they were going to use to make the game than actually the game itself. So after releasing Goo Ball, they thought, we should release an engine instead. It's a good job they decided to make that decision. So this is some of the early days. I think that was pretty much just before I got hired. Yeah, I think so. And this is in Montreal, so we're slowly multiplying. And then this was our Unite conference last year in San Francisco. So we've grown considerably. And if you look closely, I'm just kind of hanging out on the front row there. But also, on the top right, in a black thing as well. Yeah. It would be helpful if I did actually have a clone because of the amount of work that I need to do, but yeah, someone photobombed the picture, so they decided to Photoshop me again. And this is live on the company website as well, so if you go to the company section, it's like hilarious. So a little bit about me. I always find it's kind of nice to learn about someone from the games that they played. I think it's kind of almost like a bit of genetic makeup. So I started out with a ZX Spectrum, and I played a lot of the Dizzy games from Codemasters. They were pretty awesome. If anyone ever goes back and tries to play the emulation of this, the cheat code is if you type in OAP and then press enter on the main title screen, you can then press the C key to teleport around to different screens. Pro tip. And then I got an Amiga, which had some fantastic games, some real golden age kind of titles in 2D. Obviously, this is cannon fodder from Sensible Software. Great bunch of guys. And somewhere along this line, I kind of discovered that I actually quite enjoyed creating this stuff as much as possible as well. So early tools that I was using were Deluxe Paint 3. And I was also kind of into animation at the time as well. And I don't know whether you can make it out, but there's this amazing picture on the front here with a guy on a unicycle juggling as a way of promoting the animation. So I'm sure that was the thing that made me think, wow, I really should do animation with this. And then I played around with the Shoot 'em Up construction kit. Again, this is from Sensible Software, and that was a fantastic, really early development tool on the Amiga. And I played quite a lot of Daggerfall at one point. Awesome Elder Scrolls game. I'm sure you'll all be familiar with the Elder Scrolls, but not necessarily Daggerfall. Cool thing with Daggerfall is that each one of those pixels on that map is like a big city or a dungeon or a town. But then, if you kind of zoom out, that was the scale of the world. So I've always been slightly disappointed with the scale of the Elder Scrolls games since then. It was huge. It was buggy as hell, but it was huge. And this is the Junior Can Build engine. I played around quite a lot with level design with those tools, and I had like a huge folder full of all of the different codes you needed to type in to modify and make a door. You know, it was really complicated stuff, but it was pretty fun to play with. And then I got into a bit of 3D Studio Max, and then I ended up going to university in Teesside in the UK, and kind of went down the path of 3D and kind of led to Unity. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm from. A little bit about briefly what Unity is. I'm sure you're probably all familiar with like the whole overall concept, but so it's a 3D engine created for making games, but also other 3D content as well. That's been something that's been a huge area of growth for us, is non-gaming applications of Unity. Even the US military are using Unity, which is kind of unnerving. And also the Large Hadron Collider as well, which makes me wonder whether or not they're relying a little bit too much on our physics system. But so yeah, what Unity's all about: rapid iteration, having a really smooth asset pipeline, and multi-platform distribution. Generic sales buzzwords, but it's actually kind of what it's good at. And the business model. So Unity comes in two basic flavors: the free flavor, which is quite tasty, and then the pro version. And there's a slight feature parity between the two. The pro version has some slightly more advanced features. Free version is a little more limited, but other than that, that's all you pay or don't pay, I guess, if you're using the free version. And there's no royalty fees or anything like that, so it's kind of nice. And then in addition to that, you can add upgrades to deploy to iOS or Android, and those kind of move like that. And there's also the team server, which used to be called the asset server, but we started adding more and more features to that license. So it's now the team server. Oh yeah, and you can also go down the route of Xbox and PS3 out of the box as well. In addition to that as well, there's also the Flash preview that you probably just heard about a little, which is currently in a preview state, but it's getting there, and it works in a lot of cases. So, to kind of reiterate how it works, basically, if you purchase a Unity license, you get to install that on any two machines you like. So you may have a Mac and a PC, you may have a laptop and a desktop machine, any kind of configuration of those two installs. And then, obviously, if you wanted to develop for any of these pixelated platforms, you could choose to do so. Then the idea is that you could decide to upgrade to get the team license and start collaborating with other people. It's not necessary to have the team license, but it's an option. And then ultimately, that will lead you to this kind of point where you have an army of developers all using Unity. Maybe. If you want to scale up. It may not be financially viable, but it's an option. Another key thing about Unity is the community. It's kind of what made it so accessible for me. So there are currently 275,000 MAD, which monthly active developers we're calling them. And I've put that question mark there as well because that's probably out of date. It's always, whenever I present a talk like this, I say, this is how many monthly active developers we have, and then I quickly find out that it's gone up again. It's always out of date. And we have the forums, the Unity Answers page, and the IRC channel as our main kind of communication channels, at least digitally. I personally would highly recommend the Unity IRC channel as a way to learn Unity. That's where I learned it, and it's a super friendly community. It's a good place to be. And then we have, which are growing a huge amount now, the Unity user groups. And these are really a really cool new thing that we're trying to work out how we can best support in the future as well. And they're cropping up all over the world. So we have a picture here from, I believe, the Arabian Unity user group. And this is the London Unity user group. They've been doing some really cool stuff recently. We actually hired one of the founders of the London Unity user group recently as well. So, yeah. And this is what happened when I searched for Stockholm Unity user group. And those are our two of our developers from Stockholm. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it really seems like there's a need for some friends for Erland and Ray to hang out with. But yeah, generally it follows the same kind of pattern globally. It's been kind of bizarre to see from my perspective because I tend to travel quite a lot with my work, and it tends to be meeting up with a bunch of people, demoing projects, showing what you're working on, followed by drinking beer. And it's weird. It's exactly the same pattern no matter where I go. So from Tokyo to Jordan to all these different places, very standard formula. It's kind of universal geeks talking about stuff and going for beers afterwards. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about these case studies. So I've picked a bunch of different developers that are using Unity for different things, and mainly just to talk about how they're making money. It's kind of a tough thing to really nail down because there's so many different developers doing so many different things that there isn't one set hard and fast rule for this is how, if you're going to use Unity, you should make money. So yeah, a lot of them are selling games, mostly, as you might expect. But that's not all they're doing. There's more to Unity for making money as well, which is kind of cool. So there's the asset store, which if you're not familiar with it, is a system that's integrated directly into the tool. And it allows you to both buy and sell assets to use in your game. So whether that's 3D assets or audio or scripts, or the more popular ones that we're seeing the most area of growth in is entire editor extensions. So the editor's fully extendable, so you can completely write your own systems into it. And that's what's really been shining on the asset store. Then there's Union. So the story with Union is that we found that quite a lot of the time we'd have hardware manufacturers contacting us and saying, hey, we really want some games. And we were kind of like, well, we don't make the games, we make the tools that make the games. And they were like, oh okay. So we needed to find some kind of solution for this because we'd kind of have, we'd have some of the bigger developers that we were working with that we'd kind of like, say, well, these guys are good, maybe you should start talking to them and this kind of stuff, but it really didn't scale. So the idea with Union was you can sign up to the Union program, you can submit your games to be part of a Union catalog, and then when these hardware developers come knocking and say, hey, we need some games, we just hand them this big folder and say, well, which games do you like? And they go through and they go, oh, we like this one, and this one would fit on our device, and this one would fit here. And they pick a bunch of games, and then with the combined revenue from that, we then go ahead and make a custom port for their hardware. And the real good thing about this is that it allows our developers to get onto a lot more kind of obscure hardware devices. So it's always a bit non-standard places that it's kind of tricky for independents or individuals to get to. So, and there's a kind of a rev share model when it comes to selling on their stores as well. So it's generally a good way to go. So first case study is Mika Mobile. So Mika Mobile started out as a a one-man and a one-woman and a cat team. They had just graduated. One of them was very much on the art side of things. And they thought, well, let's make some games. And the first one they did was Zombieville, USA, which got a huge amount of coverage on the App Store when it was first launched. It was very successful, and then because of that, they kind of iterated on this concept. So yeah, Zombieville, USA. They then moved on to creating OMG Pirates, which was a game where you play as a ninja. So you can see a theme here with zombies, ninjas, and pirates in their games. But and they were using obviously the same tech as well as they go through. With Zombieville USA, they were doing some very clever stuff for generating all of their 2D, 3D artwork. It's commonly stated by people that Unity's a 3D engine, so you can't really do 2D, but they're wrong. I tell you, it's very much possible. Plus, you get the added bonus that if you want to add some extra depth to it, you can do that at a moment's notice. So yeah, they kind of evolved this really nice system again, and they released Battleheart, which is kind of a party-based RPG system, which is another cool game, and they've been very successful with that as well. And then they're going on as well with working on Zombieville USA 2. Again, just refining the same concept, but improving as they go. And one thing that was really interesting is that the Mika Mobile guys have spoken quite a bit about the differences between iOS and Android when it comes to deploying their games and what kind of numbers they've been seeing. So yeah, I'll go through some of those bits of numbers for the more numberly inclined people. So initially they were seeing daily revenue 80% of what they were seeing on iOS, which seems, relatively good for an Android title, I thought. And they go into some detail about how that's working. So Battleheart on Android is currently very high in the Android charts, top 50 apps, whereas Battleheart for the iOS is not even in the top 200 games anymore, and yet is still outselling it. It's clear that the overall size of the iOS market is still significantly larger, which, still makes a lot of sense. And then they want to say that Battleheart on iOS has had much stronger first couple of months due to the prominent featuring by Apple, and since that initial rush has seen a steady decline. Battleheart on Android will likely see a similar decline as it spends more time on the market. If you compare launch months, then the iOS version outpaced the Android version by a factor of 20. So not only does that say a huge amount about the importance of becoming featured or being in some of these top games on the iOS store, but interestingly, after writing this statement on his blog, something changed. So suddenly he realized that he had got a lot more sales on the Android version. He didn't quite know why. He talks a little bit here about the reviews that he was getting. He says on Android it's a stunning 4.8 with 1,000 ratings. I don't know whether I agree with that being such a dramatic difference. 4,000 total ratings, 4.5, 1,000 ratings, 4.8. That doesn't seem so stunning. But Generally good reviews, though. Yeah, so this whole thing with the Android version success being entirely driven by word of mouth and recommendations. So that was the way it initially appeared to him. So everything on the iOS was doing very well because of all of these new and noteworthy and Game of the Week commendations that it got. But then the Android version seemed at this point to be entirely driven by this whole word of mouth and recommendations thing, which I guess is kind of cool. You've got to think as well that it's quite possible that someone with an iOS phone would show their friend a game, and then without an iOS phone would go and check on the App Store and be able to find the same thing. So you do get some kind of cross-pollination, I'm sure. You know, it's not all driven by one linear system. There is going to be some backwards and forwards. But then shortly after writing this, he found out that he had then been featured on the Android market as well, which in this case increased his sales by 300%, which is a huge amount. So I guess the main takeaway is that, you know, being featured somehow on these marketplaces makes a huge difference in how your game's received and how it sells, which is why I find it a kind of a scary marketplace to be involved with. I have a friend who worked on a really fantastic game and put a huge amount of work into it, called Time Ducks, from these guys called Tough Guy Studios in Denmark. And yeah, they had a fantastic trailer. It was like a spoof of the Doctor Strangelove trailer, but with ducks and time manipulation. It was fantastic, and they got a huge amount of media, like press coverage and all kinds of interviews, and they had all of the stuff that you could expect and want to have on the launch of a title, especially on the iOS. But just didn't see the sales. It just never made it into this top, tier section of the store, especially with iOS, which is kind of a shame because you put a huge amount of effort into it, but then despite all of this marketing and all of these interviews and reviews that they had, they just didn't get the sales. So yeah, the reason for that, I guess, is up for debate really. But it can be a bit of a risky market overall. So the next on the user case studies is the Creative Assembly, who I don't know if you realize, but they have recently started using Unity. So they started introducing this new concept with Total War battles. So they make these huge, epic real-time strategy games, and they decided that they were going to have a small mobile division that were completely separate from the core team, but use them to work on mobile titles to see, whether or not it's a worthy investment of time. And it certainly seems like that was the case. But the interesting thing that they're doing is that, this is something that I've always thought needs to be explored more, so I'm kind of glad that a good company's doing this. But instead of doing kind of like cross-platform development in a way and having like one game that then morphs to all the other platforms, which is great, and it's something that you can use Unity for, pretty much out the box. But I think cross-platform IP is slightly more interesting. Having games that complement each other is a very interesting development, I think. And there's this fantastic quote from actually creating the game. They recently did an interview in Develop magazine, and luckily they were talking about how the Unity side of things and the prototyping and creating everything initially was fantastic. The only problems they ran into were when it came to actually creating the concept for the gameplay. And I think it sounds like a very kind of British quote of what they were trying to do was to fit a cathedral in a teacup. And it makes a lot of sense because the Total War games are incredibly huge, and trying to fit that into a more condensed experience must have been quite a challenge. But they seem to have done quite a good job. And one thing they're doing with this as well is that they're having, it's almost kind of like a DLC option in a way. It's kind of weird. But the idea is that if you purchase the iOS kind of almost companion game, and then get to complete it, you unlock a faction in the main game. So there's all of this interesting backwards and forwards between the IPs. So I'm really curious to see how that develops in the future. And it's kind of nice that people are recognizing that having one IP across multiple platforms that then are connected to each other in some way it makes a lot of sense, because it's impossible to play a game like, say, Battlefield 3 while you're on a bus that's bumping around. Whereas if you have, complementary games on different devices that really react well with the different form factors and the different environments that you'd be using them in, I think it's a good area of exploration, and it should be explored. So this one's kind of slightly different. This is someone who, one of the Unity developers who created a bunch of tools on the asset store, Brady Wright from AB Software. So he created these two tools, the Easy GUI tool and the Sprite Manager. And that's one of the great things about the asset store, is that what it tends to do is allows developers using the tool that recognize that there's some kind of feature that's missing or something that's not quite as good as they'd like. You can then capitalize on that before Unity, fix the problem, I guess, and make money from it. So Easy GUI, for example, as you might guess from the name, is a tool that's used to make the creations of GUIs within Unity easier. We are currently working on an improved GUI system, but in the meantime, he's doing very well with his solution for making the creation of GUIs that much better. And then Sprite Manager is a tool that's been around for quite a while now, and it's pretty awesome. It's a way of generating 2D assets and animations directly within Unity. So those were his two main tools that he released. And then this is Brady here with a ridiculous check and ridiculous balloons. Super cheesy, but we thought it needed to be like that. So he's as you can see there, he's got $15,575, which is his monthly earnings, which is pretty impressive. Obviously, this is like the toppest tier of what people are earning on the store, but it just goes to show that if you want to, you can technically be a tools developer within Unity. And not only that, you can also, if you're working through development on a project and you write some extensions to Unity that you believe could be helpful to other people, you can follow the same path and have an additional revenue stream alongside the game itself. And as Unity themselves found out, by making Gooball, sometimes writing tools can be more effective than writing Gooball. So yeah, it's another revenue stream that's definitely worth investigating, especially if that's something that's more of interest. And then a little bit more on Union. So Union as a tool, in order to allow you to deploy to different platforms, has been pretty interesting. It's still relatively in its early stages because there's a lot more kind of business side involved in terms of arranging deals and different ports to different hardware, but it's getting there. So the first main big title, I guess, was the Shadowgun project that was ported over to a bunch of different platforms, and also Frisbee Forever, which was kind of like a Frisbee game that's, initially it was on an Android title, but it got moved to some different things as well. And there's a lot more in this huge category, but these are some of the different hardware platforms that we're exporting over to now. So the LG Smart TV is pretty interesting. I got a chance to see that out at CES in January. But the main concept really behind Uni is this thing of being able to access these platforms that you'd never really ever be able to access before. I guess the Sony Xperia Play is probably the biggest exception on this list, but generally the idea is that we can write a completely custom port using the business deal as leverage, and then get some nice rev share model or something in place for our developers as a result. And it just means you can get your game in more places, which is always an advantage, right? So alongside this, I've got a fantastic
Tell us what you're doing, Joe.
I'm just flying through some hoops.
So yeah, that's me in my non-typical environment. That's my wedding and funeral suit. It was, which was my requirement. I had like a clothing requirement for being at the LG booth and demoing the tech, which was very bizarre. But it was kind of cool. They have this big LG smart TV, and then they have this thing that they call the Magic Remote, which is effectively a Wii remote, really. And yeah, and it was all hooked up to the tilt sensors, and it also has built-in 3D as well, obviously, so you can put these glasses on and press the 3D button. It's kind of interesting, although I didn't feel so comfortable in that suit. I'm not a suit person. So yeah, there's a lot of other areas of growth as well, in terms of different places to deploy your games through Unity. So Steam is one of them that's been certainly growing a lot more with different Unity projects. The great thing here is the fact that creating a game on PC and Mac with Unity is very, very easy, because they're pretty much very similar platforms, same input, all that kind of stuff. And the fact that Steam supports that Mac and PC option definitely gives Unity developers a running advantage to be able to deploy to both of them, especially because the Mac as a potential target for games these days is growing a lot more, and I think Steam's doing a huge amount for that. And then there's PS3 as well as 360, which has been around for a little while, but I guess PS3 games and 360 games do tend to take a lot more time to develop. But the first one that we were involved with was Rochard, which is out on, I believe, all 3 platforms now. And that was our first. Initially, it was the first PS3 title we'd done, so it was an interesting, route to go down. But it seems to have been pretty successful. And then in addition to that, there's a lot more games. One that you should definitely know about is PID from Might and Delight, which I personally am very interested to see how it does, because I was here 2 years ago, and at that time I was saying, hey, yeah, you guys should use Unity. That would be great. And so they did, and hopefully it's a great success. It's almost here, so fingers crossed. And then another random one that's kind of becoming something that we're kind of focusing our searchlight, I guess, on is the Desura platform. I'm not sure quite how big the user base is for Desura right now, but there's some interesting things going on there. They have, as well as having sales of all kinds of different indie games, they also have this alpha development section. So you can sign up as a developer, release the game in an alpha state, and then get alpha funding through that. So that's certainly an interesting business model, especially for indies. I think Desura could be pretty interesting down the line. And yeah, I'm going to talk briefly a little bit about some of the future Unity tech that's coming up. There's not really much that I can really talk about, but so we're currently working on a much improved GUI system. It's currently in it's known internally as the new GUI system, because it's had that many different major iterations. So that one's a big new feature that's on its way. And then the next one is from this company called Mechanim that we acquired out in, I guess now known as Unity Canada. And this is a bunch of guys who used to work at Motion Builder. And so they're working on this tech purely for animation. So I'll just play the video because it kind of explains things best. Okay, so yeah, that's the new animation stuff that's coming. It's been a pretty big chunk of development, and it's going to be pretty interesting because that's one thing that's one of our bits of feedback that we've been getting is that the animation system could do with some overhauling, and it's getting a huge bit of overhauling with that mechanism system. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have right now. So if anyone has any questions about anything I've spoken about, or even anything about the engine or whatever, feel free to ask. Do I see any? Yes. Yes, I didn't. I completely failed to mention that. From being in Denmark and attempting to learn the language, yet failing miserably, I feel I deserve to be an honorary Viking. Now, it's funny. I spend a lot of time in the Nordic regions these days, which is nice. So yeah, kind of like an honorary Viking. Plus, I've got the beard and the hair, right? So. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah, so there's a bunch of different options. There's a company, our education reseller company, who can sell directly to students. And they have, it's called Studica, 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 I believe that's it. And yeah, they have all kinds of options specifically for students. So that's one option there. I believe it's a slightly different model, but it's the one that we mainly use for student licensing. Alternatively, when it comes to like more licensing to an educational establishment, then it's more of a different discount involved with our education team. But, yeah. Do I see any more questions? I don't think so. Okay, cool. Well, thanks.